love her. I hope to see her soon.
The video gave Americans their public introduction to McCain as a prisoner of war. After 6 weeks of hospital care, he was thrown into a cell with 2 other prisoners who took care of him. In the spring of 1968, McCain was put into solitary confinement for 2 years. With his father's promotion to becoming the Commander-in-Chief of the Pacific Forces, the POW was offered an early release. But McCain refused the special treatment, citing the unofficial policy of the first man in is the first man out. He suffered greatly in solitary and was subjected to worse beatings than he had ever experienced in August. After days of severe torture, McCain attempted to hang himself, but was saved by a guard who stopped him and then beat him. Finally, McCain had found his breaking point and signed an anti-American propaganda confession. It bought him 2 weeks of recovery time, but when he refused more statements, he was again beaten. The confession broke John's spirit, as he would never truly forgive himself for signing it. Eventually, McCain was let out of solitary and was put in a group cell. He bonded with his fellow POWs, and they celebrated when they heard American aircraft bombing the city. In March of 1973, McCain's torment as a POW ended, as he was finally released after 5.5 years of suffering. For his bravery, he earned the Bronze Star, the Silver Star, the Purple Heart, and the Distinguished Flying Cross. The nation tuned in as America's heroes were coming home. Lieutenant Commander John McCain reunited with his children and wife Carol with great joy. While they had been away, Carol was in a serious car accident that left her with severe injuries, needing 23 surgeries, resulting in her being 4 inches shorter and on crutches. She never mentioned it in her letters to John because she knew he already had enough to worry about. John, too, was physically hampered by his injuries and spent 9 months rehabbing to regain use of his leg and be able to fly again. In 1977, McCain was assigned a new job that kept him in the spotlight as he hosted important government and Navy people acting as a liaison between the two. McCain reverted back to his old ways, enjoying the party scene, and his marriage began to head south. In April of 1979, the 42-year-old McCain met 24-year-old Cindy Hensley, a teacher from Arizona and an heiress to a beer distributing company. The two began an affair, and by the end of the year, the McCains had separated.
I did things that I regret, and I will not go into those details except to say that some of my behavior was clearly inappropriate.
In April of 1980, the divorce was finalized between Carol and John. The next month, McCain married Cindy. Despite the age difference between the lovebirds, they enjoyed one another's free spirit. After retiring from the Navy, McCain embarked on a new journey, running for Congress. He easily won the House seat in Arizona as a Republican, and he served there until 1986, when Senator Barry Goldwater retired. McCain defeated his opponent by 20 percentage points and became a major player in Washington, D.C. The senator's rising profile in the party landed him on the short list of vice presidential candidates for George H.W. Bush in 1988. In the late 80s and early 90s, his political career took a hit as a scandal broke out with Senator McCain being named as one of the Keating Five. McCain and 4 other senators were accused of holding a meeting with federal regulators to prevent them from continuing to investigate Charles Keating, a friend of the senators and a campaign contributor, but McCain and the others admitted to no wrongdoing taking place at the actual meeting.
I shouldn't have been there. The impression created by 5 senators, a couple of them pretty powerful, talking with the regulators over an issue was improper.
McCain and the rest of the Keating Five were questioned by the Senate Ethics Committee and had to sit in front of their peers to testify and answer questions. But ultimately none of the 5 senators were charged with a crime, and the scandal didn't affect McCain's re-election bid in 1992, as he easily retained his Senate seat. In the 90s, McCain was able to once again define himself as a nonconformist in the Senate, carving his own path and working with Democrats on a handful of issues. When we return, we'll take a look at John McCain's first run for the presidency. Stay tuned.
Time for a new cell phone? You can get one for free with select plans from KHP Electronics. Find the latest models and the best plans. We have phones and plans for everyone from AT&T to Sprint. Even upgrade your BlackBerry today.
Welcome back to For Such a Time. During the late 90s, John McCain was becoming quite the popular fellow. He was named one of Time magazine's most influential people in America. He was elected to his third term in the Senate, and in 1999 he published his memoir, Faith of My Fathers. All of this gave him the springboard to dive into the 2000 race for the White House. In the year 2000, Americans quickly realized that the Y2K bug was nothing to be worried about. The boy bands were all the rage again, and reality TV shows were now popping up on major networks. On the political front, people were getting ready to say goodbye to President Bill Clinton and the drama of the Monica Lewinsky scandal, and they were ready to usher in a new president. In the Republican primary race, Texas Governor George W. Bush was considered the frontrunner with strong financial backing and the legacy of his father having already served as commander-in-chief. Senator John McCain had an uphill battle on his hands after Governor Bush won the Iowa caucuses. The McCain campaign knew that the New Hampshire primary would be pivotal, so McCain unveiled his bus, the Straight Talk Express. In it, he hit the roads of New Hampshire to speak to the voters.
The message of John McCain's campaign that he's taking on the fat cats, the big boys, the lobbyists, he's going to clean up Washington by getting rid of dirty money and the Iron Triangle and all that.
Small town after small town, McCain connected with the independents and Republicans at town hall-style meetings. On February 1, 2000, the Straight Talk Express paid off as the Arizona senator won 49% of the vote compared to Governor Bush's 30%. The double-digit win propelled McCain to his new status as a true contender in the race.
And it's just purely anecdotal, but in terms of the crowds he's drawing and the enthusiasm, even Democrats down here who can vote in this Republican primary, there's some Democrats saying they like McCain and they're going to vote for him. There's something out there coming off of New Hampshire where there's a certain enthusiasm for McCain that you don't see for Bush.
The voters of South Carolina were getting to listen to John McCain up close in the Palmetto State, and they were liking what they heard. It wasn't necessarily where he stood on the issues. It was his image that people were taking note of. McCain's status as a Vietnam vet and his maverick reputation helped to define some of the differences between he and Governor Bush. McCain had always been known as someone who didn't mind rocking the boat. Only this time, he was rocking the entire Republican Party. John McCain was not your typical Republican. While he did toe the party line by being anti-abortion and pro-small government, he also worked on campaign finance reform in the late 90s, and he went after big tobacco companies alongside many Democrats.
McCain is seen by voters as more as the anti-establishment candidate. It's partly, I think, because he is not well liked by his colleagues in Congress, and he's always been sort of a go against the grain type of personality, and that seems to be suiting the electorate right now.
As the former Navy pilots started to take control in South Carolina, the Bush campaign feared they might be losing the state. It was then that George W. Bush and his team changed their strategy to one as old as politics itself. The mudslinging contest got ugly, as the negative attacks on McCain came not only from the Bush camp, but from several special interest groups McCain had stood up to. They also came from an unidentified group that started outlandish rumors about McCain's adopted daughter, and also that he was mentally unstable from his POW experience. McCain fought back with ads attacking Bush's credibility and comparing him to President Clinton. But John McCain was running short on funding in South Carolina, and with the evangelical voters in Governor Bush's back pocket, McCain lost the brutal contest on February 19, 2000. 3 days later, the McCain camp seemed to rally a bit with wins in Michigan and his home state of Arizona. But the senator could not keep pace with the Bush campaign. On Super Tuesday, McCain lost in 9 of the 13 contests. Governor Bush had too strong of a lead in delegates, and so McCain suspended his campaign and waited 2 months to endorse the Texas governor. McCain went back to work in the Senate, voting against the new President Bush's tax cuts for the wealthy. By 2004, with the nation at war, McCain swallowed his pride and threw his support behind President Bush.
Now, I'm really popping off, but he worked like a dog to get Bush reelected. he's backed Bush in everything except Rumsfeld. Have you ever heard of other senators and congressmen backing Bush over 8 years? Find me, give me a name.
But I do want to be clear.
Experience.
You voted for Bush in 2000.
I voted for Bush in 2000 and 2004. Okay. And not only that, far more important than a vote, I campaigned everywhere in America for him. I enjoyed it. I campaigned with him. I did everything I could to get him elected and re-elected president.
Next up, John McCain's final push to land the Republican nomination.
Time for a new cell phone? You can get one for free with select plans from KHP Electronics. Find the latest models and the best plans. We have phones and plans for everyone from AT&T to Sprint. Even upgrade your BlackBerry today.
In April of 2007, McCain officially threw his hat into the ring again. But in the 2008 Republican presidential race, it was wide open, with candidates like Mike Huckabee, Mitt Romney, Ron Paul, Rudy Giuliani, and Fred Thompson, all creating their own buzz. It was Governor Mike Huckabee who took the first win on January 3rd in the Iowa caucuses. It was a stinging defeat for McCain, who finished tied for third with Fred Thompson, while Mitt Romney took second. The poor showing in Iowa meant McCain's camp was running low on donations, and they focused more intensely on the New Hampshire primary. McCain succeeded in stealing a win from Romney and his regional advantage as former governor of Massachusetts, a border state. Senator McCain had a long history with the people of New Hampshire, and he connected with the large independent older voter base there. On January 8, 2008, McCain let it be known that Mac was back.
My friends, you know, I'm past the age when I can claim the noun kid, no matter what adjective precedes it. But tonight, we sure showed them what a comeback looks like.
As Senator McCain was celebrating his huge win in New Hampshire, he was also taking on friendly fire from conservative radio talk show host Rush Limbaugh. He was attacked for not being a true conservative. Senator McCain had a reputation for stepping across the aisle and working with Democrats on issues he felt strongly about. While this made him a champion of independent thinkers, it also made life more difficult for him in his own party. Despite the attacks from fellow Republicans on his status as a conservative, McCain stood strong on the war and kept his campaign looking forward. While Romney went on to win Michigan, the Republican Party now appeared as divided as it ever has been. The American people were also dealing with the issues of the war in Iraq, a struggling economy, gas prices continuing to rise above $3 per gallon, and the sinking approval rating of President George W. Bush. Some Republicans were looking for a different kind of leader for their party, someone who struck them as more open and honest and didn't have the typical political soundbite routine down. What they found was John McCain. In South Carolina, McCain's campaign returned to the scene of the crime, where he had suffered the bitter loss to George W. Bush in 2000. This time around, though, the voters pushed him over the top and gave him his second big win of the year 2008.
Thank you, South Carolina, for bringing us across the finish line first in the South primary. Well, it took us a while, but what's 8 years among friends?
A week later, on January 29th, McCain took a recognizable lead in the Republican race when he captured a win in the state of Florida. It was in Florida where Rudy Giuliani had put all his eggs in one basket and tried to swing the election his way. Giuliani finished a disappointing third, and he immediately threw his support behind the Arizona senator.
But most importantly, my country will have a candidate